Hi, folks. Welcome back to the Leeds View podcast, the preview for Crystal Palace and Leeds back at Ellen Road this weekend. If you're listening on the audio platforms, if you could give us a rating as well as stick a comment on your relative platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube, you could stick the like button on and also hit subscribe and hype. That would be super beneficial. We're doing something a little bit different tonight. I'm delighted to be joined by Darragh Cunningham from Leeds Stat and Oscar Marriott from All Leeds TV. A little bit of a Leeds channel collaboration for a preview, but we're not just going to talk about Crystal Palace and Leeds. We're going to talk a little bit about January as well, just because Daniel Farke said a couple of things today that got my brain spinning around, and I'm now curious to see if it's just me or is anybody else overthinking January already like I am. But I'm delighted to be joined by the lads, and we'll check in with them and see how they're getting on. Darragh, thanks for joining us on the channel, and how are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks, Jared. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem, mate. How's things been with you? You good?
Yeah, all good, all good. I think the last week of our last 2 weeks have been pretty good as a Leeds fan. I think most Leeds fans, my mood in life tends to fluctuate with results. So I think we were all pretty much down in the dumps following Burnley and Forest and Brighton, and then the world just seems like a far better place after those big three came to town and we put them to the sword.
Yeah, a bit of a shock. I don't think any of us saw that coming, but we're all in a much better, happier place. We're not in the bottom three, and I didn't think that would happen after those 3 games, but everything's heading in a much better direction. Oscar, how are you, mate? Thanks for joining us on the channel, and how have you been?
All good, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's obviously free of the Yorkshire Roses as well from the famous cup-winning side as well. We'll just add that in there as well. Of course, I can't compare my contribution to Jer's contribution in that game because Jer was an absolute man-mountain in that game. But anyway, Leeds, we're in a great space at the minute. I think we're in our best space so far this season. I think there's no question about that. I was a little bit worried going into Brentford, in terms of it's a different type of game, in terms of there'll be more onus on us to attack, use the ball ourselves. But I thought we gave a really good account of ourselves. And I didn't think I'd say this season that much, but I'm actually really looking forward to watching us play. Not just actually watching us play, in terms of the way it feels like a proper Leeds team, a throwback to the early 2000s, almost how we're playing at this moment in time. Whether that's going to stay the way it is, because of course we know things change at this level very quickly. But at this moment in time, I've genuinely really enjoyed the last 4 games from what we've done.
Yeah, it's been, and when people talk about direct football, you think hoofball, but it's not been like that. It's been a nice mixture of how especially the Chelsea game. I really enjoyed watching that game, and I've done a watch-alongs now for a year, and I don't think I've really ever, even in the Championship, really enjoyed a game of football. I did one for the Ireland-Hungary game, and that was I got emotional during that one, but that was a different kettle of fish. But outside of that, I don't think I genuinely got excited watching the game. And the Chelsea game was that the second half against Man City, I think I walked away from that thinking, that's really positive. And it's really tough doing a review of a game, positive that you lost. But there was such a lot of interesting things that happened. The 3, which obviously has been the foundation then to where we are now. But we're coming into, I suppose, a couple of games where the expectation might be shifting. It shouldn't shift that much because Crystal Palace, despite their fixture congestion, Darragh, a really, really good side. They're in 5th place in the league. I mean, I was looking at the records coming into this just to do a bit of prep on it. They're 5th in the table, and the last 5 they've lost only 2 games and they've won 3. But they've got the best away record in the league, which is surprising considering what they've got. But it's back at Ellen Road. They're missing a ton of players. Kamada's out, Muniz is out, Sarr is out, and the manager Glasner says he won't pick the same 11 on Saturday that he will tonight. I'm eagerly waiting to see his team sheet tonight, see if Mattel's on the bench. So what are your thoughts coming into this big opportunity for Leeds Darragh to try and get some points here now?
Yeah, I think it's the best opportunity we're going to have to get some points off them based on the current form table. Like I say, I did a little research before coming on, and I checked home and away record. And when I went to the away record, I couldn't see them. And I looked down as well. And I scroll up the top, and there they were ahead of Man City, and I'm going, oh my God, they've 26 points, which is fantastic. Yeah. They're sitting 5th in the table, and they are 16 of those 26 were away from home. So you got to give them credit for that. I mean, like, that manager's getting some incredible results since going in there. But as you say, fixture congestion. They have a match tonight against a tough enough side. I actually had a look at their form guide as well. And there's only 1 win separating the 2 of them. I think the team they're playing tonight only have 2 wins out of 5. Palace have 3 wins out of 5. So it's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. Hopefully we might see a couple more injuries. Not wishing ill on people, but wouldn't mind if there's a slight hamstring strain or an ankle twitch. to put a few more players out. But yeah, I mean, all things considered, with us having a full squad, as of last week, Farke has confirmed that in his presser. It was not as if we have Longstaff back or Mecha, but we're at full strength as can be, and they're depleted. So I don't think there's going to be a better chance to take some points. So I think we've got to be aiming for all three.
Darragh, do you think there's also something to be read into the manager's situation as well? Because this week it came out that he's not going to sign an extension at the club and he's going to leave at the end of the season. Does that maybe change players' mindsets as well coming into this? And it's going to be the first game where that information's come out publicly, where that dressing room might be just looking at their manager thinking, well, you're not going to be around here for long, mate.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think it absolutely has to. Like, it'd be the same. We'd see, obviously, my background in Olympic sports, we'd see it a lot in that when a coach or a performance director or something comes out and announces that they're leaving after an Olympic cycle, although the athlete is doing it for themselves, there is an element in the back of your mind that just can hamper training and preparation. So it has to be the same across football. And particularly where long-term contracts are in place for a year or two, where you're a certain favourite of a manager, certainly the people who will be most buoyed by that are the people who aren't getting a game. Now, I know Palace do a lot of rotation, but the people who aren't getting a game will now be buoyed by the fact that they might have a new manager coming in. But yeah, I do think so. I think that I often think that level of transparency in football clubs is often detrimental. I don't think I've ever seen it work, actually. I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I don't recall a situation where someone has announced they're leaving and then the team ups their level for the rest of the season as some sort of farewell gift. It just doesn't happen. They tend to end up in disarray, and by the end of it, you're kind of saying good riddance to the manager. Maybe he should have gone a couple of months earlier.
Yeah, it tends to. I think Ferguson announced it and then rolled back on it after results turned around and stopped being good. And all of a sudden, he was like, "No, actually, I'm not going, lads. I'll stick around." And
yeah, I didn't want to say him.
Well, yeah, Wenger, I think, tried to do the same as well, and it didn't end well. But it wasn't going well towards the end there, anyway. But yeah, it doesn't end well. Oscar, what's your take on this game in general, but also the current situation at Crystal Palace?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the most comparable situation, I guess, because I'd imagine Glasner's got to be Palace's best manager of all time, if not one of their best managers of all time, not being totally clued up on Palace's history. So it's definitely going to be a blow. Maybe not just so much with the players, but I think the fans themselves, in terms of the ownership, there will be a bit of panic there. I think the most comparable situation is Jurgen Klopp 2 years ago. I think he resigned. He announced he was leaving late January 2024, and that was for the May of 2024. And that felt quite early as well. And this is like 6 weeks before that. And you're thinking, oof, Palace could still finish. Easily could finish top 5, top 6 this season. And top 5, as we know, could well be enough for the Champions League. Probably would be enough for the Champions League, which is not a crazy thing to say because there's a lot of inconsistency behind Palace at the minute. I think the teams above them will probably stay above them at this moment in time. They probably won't catch those teams. But this is a good team we're facing. And I still have PTSD from the last time we played Crystal Palace, in terms of both games that season. And of course, there's no Eberechi. There's no Michael Elise. We know how good those players have turned out to be. We knew they were good players when we played them, but now we realise how good they are. But I think Palace as a team all round are much better now than what they were then, which is a little bit scary. But I think we're also better. I think we're also better equipped to take on a team like Crystal Palace. I think trying to get at this Crystal Palace team is going to be difficult because I imagine Gahey will probably be rested for this game tonight and probably will play on Sunday and the game against Arsenal after that. But Palace are going to have to manage the squad a little bit, and it'll be interesting if the game is a sort of an even game state later on, whether Glasner will have half an eye on that Arsenal game, later in the week, in terms of knowing how good an opportunity it is to win another trophy at Crystal Palace at the end of the season. So it'll be interesting from that point of view. But for me, it's certainly a winnable game. I'd say that much. I look at it similar to the Villa game where it won't go all our way, and I think it's going to be decided in moments. I think obviously when you've got Calvert-Lewin in the form he's in at this moment in time, he is confident in front of goal, and when Dominic Calvert-Lewin's confident in front of goal, he tends to go on the run. I've been really happy even without the goals with Calvert-Lewin's contribution this season. I think Anton Stack's gone up a level, so we have got potential difference makers for ourselves. Of course, they've got difference makers as well. Jeremy Pino, someone I've been a fan of for quite a while, obviously from La Liga, watched quite a lot of him at Villarreal. Not surprised to see he stepped into Eze's shoes quite well. So it'll be interesting from that point of view how we cope with Pino. Because I think what I've noticed last couple of weeks, certainly against City, certainly against Brentford, is I don't think we cope very well with number 10s. I think number 10s have a lot of joy against us. Morgan Rogers, Phil Foden. I think Damsgaard, when he came on against us, I'm quite glad he didn't start that game for Brentford. I thought he was a big difference maker for them. So it'll be interesting how we pick up Pino, because he will kind of play on the left, but he's kind of more of a number 10 than he is a left winger. So interesting from that point of view. But getting at this Palace team is very, very difficult. I think Wharton's another player I look at and think that's going to be a very important midfield battle against him. But there's a lot of ways we can hurt Palace. Personally, I'm not sure Palace will finish as high as what they are right now. They probably will have a dodgy run at some point, and this might be the best time to play Palace. When things are quite interesting, because you even think of like people like Mark Gay, for example, who didn't get his famous move to Liverpool in the summer because Glasner. We don't know for sure, but there was hints that Glasner kind of threatened to quit, and you kind of figured if you're Mark Gay and thinking, well, hang on a minute, I've kind of like, I'm not going to start feeling sorry for Mark Gay because he's got loads of options in January now. It's probably worked out better for him, but you're kind of thinking, oh, hang on a minute, that's quite interesting from that point of view. Am I going to be fully committed? I've potentially got a move in January. It's interesting. It's just a few things like that in the Palace team, a little bit of doubt. So don't get me wrong. I think Mark Gay is a fantastic player and will be 100% professional, but there might just be a few doubts in one or two players' minds, I think, at this moment in time.
Yeah, it does become a more difficult thing to listen to a manager, especially if it's not going well and they're berating you, going, well, I don't have to listen to you, pal. You're not going to be here in 6 months' time. So what am I even bothering for? Why are you talking to me? You're the one that's walking out on us, not us. And as you say, if it's a case they stopped, or Glasner stopped Gahey from going and want him to commit to the club, or else he was going to walk. Well, you're walking now, so why should I commit to the club? You've gone back on your own word. So, yeah, it's an unusual thing to announce. They're already talking about replacement managers, so the whole thing is, it could happen, Darragh, to your point, earlier than the end of the season because of what it could cause. But yeah, no doubt they'll still put a performance in tonight, and they'll still put a performance in against Leeds. It's still very soon, but that will bring us on to the team selection as well, because they will potentially change 11 players. We're still waiting to see what their lineup is for tonight's game. But Leeds will have the same side out against Palace on Saturday, pretty much, at least selection-wise, that we had for the last game. No Lucas Mecha, unfortunately, still not available. So likely to see Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who got a huge amount of praise today in the press conference. It was all about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I loved seeing his goal map this week as well, where every single goal he scored is a perfectly straight line from the penalty spot to the 6-yard line, which is unbelievably consistent for a number 9. But he's had a partnership with Noah Okafor, and I wanted to get your take on how do you think that partnership's gone? Daniel Farke obviously spoke a lot today about the fact that Okafor can play as a second striker, and played an awful lot when he was at Milan there, and when he was at Red Bull as well. So is that partnership working for you, or are you surprised that Joel Peru hasn't managed to find his way into that too yet?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised Peru hasn't got into that yet, to be quite honest. I think his game is clearly aimed at being a second striker. It's kind of a bit like Joffy. Like you play him up front on his own, and you go, nah, I don't know where you fit into this. But in a different era, in a different system, you could absolutely see it working in it too. Saying that, I don't think Okafor's been bad. I thought he was very dangerous last week. In fact, he nearly opened the score in a couple of times, only for a couple of good saves from Kelleher. And there's one where he went to flash it across the box to Jayden Bogle, and Kelleher got a heel or something on it. Great deflection. So I think we have good options up front. Obviously, I do think Mecha and DCL seem to bounce off each other. Mecha has that additional pace, and he has the physicality. DCL will play up front with anyone. It's kind of like back to that tennis question. I think they asked someone a few years ago. I think it was Peter Fleming. Him and John McEnroe were winning all the titles, and they said, who do you think's the best doubles team in the world? And he said, John McEnroe and anybody. And that's kind of what it's like with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Dominic Calvert-Lewin up front with anyone. It'd be kind of like playing in the Creators' Cup with Gerald Lynch up front. Literally, anyone could play around him. Anyone could play around him. He'd be holding it up, be knocking it on, winning headers. And it'd be a joy to play with. So, but the interesting one is, and I don't think he'll do it, but I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind seeing Willie coming in. He's done so well and made such a big impact. You kind of go, look, if you're on merit and you're going to say, look, I'm bringing you on as a sub, have an impact, and we'll see how it goes. You might get your chance.
He was signed as a striker, Darragh.
He was, exactly. And he plays a striker for Italy. So it's not as if he doesn't understand the position. And he does work hard. But at the moment, he's showing glimpses of quality. Like the penalty was very clever. The cross in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin was a touch of absolute quality. So I wouldn't say Okafor is. I don't think he's been bad, but I wouldn't say his position is nailed on. If as the second striker, I do think if someone comes in and does well, let's give Willie a chance. And I do think there's a part to play for DC or for Peru if and until that ton of transfer happens. But we talk about that, I'm sure, later.
Yeah, we'll get to that because there were some indicators in this press conference where, as much as Daniel Farke said, I don't want to sell Joel Peru, I kind of made out that he maybe will. So there's some bits that, but we'll get to that towards the back end when we start moving into January. But on Peru, Oscar, are you surprised that he hasn't gotten more of an opportunity? I thought Brentford might actually be the perfect game to bring him in because all the talk last year was Joe Peru's natural position is as a second striker. Leeds don't play with two up top, and he kind of feels isolated on his own. He doesn't have the ability to hold the ball up as well. He doesn't have the aerial threat that you need from a single striker. And then Leeds start playing it too, and you think, this is it. This is his moment now. He'll come in here, and he's not even really got a sniff off the bench either.
Yeah, it's interesting, obviously, with Peru. Yeah, I mean, obviously, just to touch on Okafor first and foremost, I think Okafor personally, I think he's better on the left. I do think that. I think he can work in a two. I think he has worked. I think his best performance in a while was against Brentford. Maybe his end product wasn't quite on point, but I thought his general play was really good. I think he created two of our most dangerous situations, especially in the first half. You know, it was one really good solo run. And with Okafor, he's always a threat. I think wherever he plays on the pitch, he's one of those players that can just win you a game in a moment kind of thing. And just, I like the idea of having players like that in the team because I don't think we've got a lot of those types of players at this moment in time. But I agree. I agree with Darragh. I think when Metcha's available, it works best with DCL and Metcha. I think they have a natural partnership there. I think they complement each other's style perfectly, absolutely perfectly in terms of Metcha, a little bit more mobile in terms of making the runs in behind. Calvert-Lewin more physical in terms of the strength, and both are good at doing the other side of the game as well. You know, it's not just a case of one's superb at one thing, not so good at the other. They both just complement each other well in that kind of regard, and it's interesting from that point of view. But in terms of Peru, it's a hard one because with Peru, when he has come on from time to time, he has looked fairly sharp. You know, I wouldn't say not really done enough to say, oh, he has to be starting. I don't think he really has done anything, you know, to say he should be starting. But in terms of the system itself, it should work better in theory. But I just think with Peru in the Premier League, I don't think Daniel Farke wants players that can't press. I really do think that is the brutal reality. I think he wants every single player. You know, we've even seen it with Altanaka. I think Altanaka is good off the ball, but he's not as good off the ball as Sean Longstaff, for example. I think we've even seen it with our best player arguably our best player last season. Even Dan James, when he's not been fully fit, hasn't been getting into the team when he's been available. So for me, that is the main problem. I don't think it's necessarily what Peru does on the ball. I think there's plenty of moments where you can say Peru in certain situations probably would have scored a couple, alongside Calvert-Lewin. You know, and it is exactly that. The John McEnroe and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, anyone alongside him, it can kind of work. I do genuinely think, I totally agree. I think anyone alongside Calvert-Lewin, I think their game goes up a level. I really do believe he gives us that flexibility in the system. But I just think that is the only reason. I just think it's the pressing side of things. That is the reason why we haven't seen so much of Joel Peru. And you look at it sort of longer term or medium term even, because it's only a couple of weeks from transfer window. You look at Joel Peru and you look at the Championship at this moment in time. You look at maybe Ipswich having a bit of an underwhelming season so far. Southampton, Leicester, you know, maybe even Borough, you know, maybe that final push, you know, maybe, you know, that one big signing to push him over the line. And you look at Peru and you think he'd be at the top of a lot of teams' lists, to be honest, you know, in terms of availability, potential new project for him. And I don't want to sort of compare Joel Peru to Adam Armstrong, but it feels like it could be something like that. Maybe not so much just for Joel Peru at Leeds, but more for his footballing career in terms of where you could see possibly Joel Peru kind of being superb in the Championship, but consistently finding himself back in the Championship, even though, you know, he's earned the chance on merit. And unfortunately, it is a tough one, but I do believe that if Daniel Farke wants us to be a pressing team, and I think the press has worked really well in the 3-5-2, and we've kind of been able to switch to a 4 at the back really smoothly. I just think with Joel Peru, it makes it more difficult at this moment in time. But don't get me wrong, there's moments where I think Joel Peru, on the end of certain chances, is one in there kind of thing. And I actually think as well, you know, not just Joel Peru and Wilfred Gnonto, I'm going to throw Harry Gray in there as well, potentially, you know, coming off the bench from time to time, you know, in certain games where There's a bit more space. I think maybe that Brentford game might have been a little opportunity, maybe last 10 minutes where the game's kind of already a little bit stretched and you maybe don't need that much tactical discipline. Maybe there's the odd opportunity there for Harry Gray potentially. I'm not saying that's something we have to do. At the end of the day, the focus is on staying in the Premier League, not youth development. But similar with Joffrey, when we didn't really play with a 4-4-2, but the nature of how we played Rodrigo as sort of a 10, it kind of sort of transpired in a 4-4-2, even though we didn't really want it to be. It kind of just ended up as a 4-4-2 because Rodrigo wanted to be anywhere but the 10 position kind of thing, and Joffrey wanted to be everywhere but the centre forward position. So it kind of worked as a 2 up top off the bench. So that is something maybe potentially to think about. But I do think we'll be flexible. I think as well as a 3-5-2, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, all these different systems, you might even see us go to a 3-4-3, where we are chasing a game, where we do kind of stick with this 3 at the back and maybe make the midfield a little bit more open and, have 2 wingers on there. It's a potential option, but I do think with Farke, we've kind of had a new manager bounce without changing manager. It's like everything's changed. Our style of play has changed. We're much more direct now. It's tactically much more flexible. It is like changing manager, and it's the perfect scenario because we've kept Daniel Farke in the job, who deserved the opportunity, even though I was maybe one who, I won't deny it, after Forest and Villa, I was someone who thought...
I said the same.
In fact, we were on the podcast together, Joe.
Same podcast together, both said the same thing.
I think we're justified at that time. I think we're totally justified in that view, and had we known what was coming forwards, I'm pretty sure we'd have probably said otherwise. And fair play to Farke. It is a very bizarre... I can't say I've known a Leeds manager turn things around so quickly with only actually winning one game. We've actually only won one game in the last 4, but it's the feel is just totally different now. It just feels 5 points from 4. Yes, it's against good opposition. Isn't actually that big an improvement, points per game wise, but it's just the general feel is much better now.
Yeah, we feel far more competitive. We look like we're a team that can actually do something, and we look like we can survive in this division, which I think was before Aston Villa. I think we all thought that's it, now we're gone. So that's been a massive shift. And yeah, we did. I was in the podcast with Jim. We were asked outright one-word answer, which I hate because there's no context. Do you think it needs to change? And I said, yeah. I think you said the same, Oscar. And I think the point at that point was we'd been saying it for a while. If the system didn't change, if the approach didn't change, if the football didn't change, if the personnel didn't change, well, then you're only left with one option to change, and that's the manager. And a new guy would come in and change the formation and change the players and change the approach. Daniel Farke has managed to do both. But there is, Darragh, this lingering thing in the back of everyone's head. And he kind of alluded to it a little bit today. He's not married to a base formation. Do you think he might start to think about going back to a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 as he did against Brentford, which wasn't as porous as the 4-3-3? Or do you think he will stick with this flexible system of starting with the 3, making us hard to break down, and then going for it in the second half?
First of all, I will back you up on the Farke out part, because I think, as much as people want to throw it in your face, I think Farke has actually proven everyone who wanted him out right. Because everyone who wanted him out said, change formation, be more unpredictable, put on earlier subs, and give other players a chance. And he's done all of those things, and it's worked. So actually, he's proven people correct, is my thing. But I love the fact that he's done it, and we haven't had to change manager. Great
more
way
stable.
putting Oscar, that new manager bounce, because that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
But all credit to Farke for doing that. But the other thing is, as well, from anyone's perspective, there was never any evidence to suggest he had that in the locker, because he didn't do it at Norwich. He didn't do it at Mönchengladbach. He didn't do it for 2 seasons at Leeds. So this is a completely out of the blue scenario. But with regards to the formation, I'd like to see horses for courses. I'd like to see him analyse a game and say, this game would be better with 3 at the back. This game would be better with 4 at the back. This game would be better with not Brendan Aronson, but anyone but Brendan Aronson in the number 10 position. This game would be better with a flat 3 in midfield. Play the team that's in front of you and adjust your tactics accordingly. The one thing I'm fearful of, and it happened last week, and it worked for him, is that on 70 minutes, we switch from the 3 at the back to a 4-3-3, and everyone knows
predictable.
Exactly. We have to avoid that. I was a bit surprised.
The system, the predictability of part of it.
Yeah,
Biol was
exactly.
like walking off the pitch before his number even went up. He just kind of knew what was coming. He was
He
like,
knew.
right, I'm coming off. We're turning to a forward at the back. And he just had that resigned look where he thought, oh, yeah, I know what's happening here now. It's so that is maybe something to look out for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important we don't slip back into those predictable traps, because I think the unpredictability has been what's worked. Because it's not, Farke is right. It's about the attitude and the application of the players. It's not necessarily about the formation, but it does help. Like it absolutely helps. And I think what also helps, if you played sport at any level, if you play against a certain style for 70 minutes and then suddenly you're playing against a completely different style, it does throw you. So that's the thing that's working, that change. As I said on Leeds a couple weeks ago, I only wish he'd have done it against Southampton in the playoff final, and all the other times when he brought on 8 strikers instead of changing formation. You know, he kind of must be looking at it now, going, probably should have done that a few other times previously. But yes, I do. I agree with you as well, Jer. I like the 5 at the back, 3 at the back, whatever we want to call it, as a starting formation. I think it gives us a platform to build on. And then if it requires a different formation, not necessarily 4-3-3, I'd love to see 4-4-2 on occasion for the last 20 minutes, if need be. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. In that, as long as it doesn't become predictable, I actually don't mind which formation he goes with.
Yeah, the 3-4-3 actually interests me quite a lot, because it actually fits Daniel Farke's plan B of last year of bring all the strikers on. Well, if you're playing a 3-4-3, you can put 3 of them on and keep it tight and narrow and still get width from the midfielders. So yeah, there's options there, but I think you're all bang on the money. I think it's the unpredictability factor. Just it's you're dealing with sports analysts at an incredibly high level, and if they can identify patterns, and they will, then your game plan's gone, because they were like, we'll do this for 70 minutes because then he's going to change and then we'll do this. And you're actually, now he's reactive again. And that's been the problem. So yeah, I think you're both bang on the money. And it's, again, Oscar, great way of putting it. A new manager bounce or a new Farke bounce, the same guy. So yeah, good way of putting it. But we did get on to January, because there's going to be loads of questions. He doesn't like answering these questions. His body language for me screams, please stop asking me about January. But he keeps saying we'll talk about when we get to January. So the 1st of January, I want him to get bombarded with questions about January, because he said he'll answer them now. There is talk that Leeds will do something. There is a PSR tightness. So again, we don't really know, because there was 7 million quid for Wilson in the summer, whether that's still floating around or more money's come in via the investor meeting a couple of weeks ago after West Ham. But he was asked about it, and he gave the impression, and he has done for a couple of weeks, Oscar, that he might be interested in doing a little bit of business in January. I thought the loan market seemed like the most obvious way, because again, PSR. But he gave the impression today that's not necessarily what he's interested in, because he doesn't feel those players that will be available for loan would be up to speed quick enough to make an impact. For you, what do you think Leeds need to do, and what are the priorities for Leeds coming into the January window, if anything?
In terms of positions, it's an interesting one, because I have quite an unpopular opinion that I think I brought up on the last podcast we were on together, Jer, in terms of the goalkeeping situation. But I'll go on to that secondly, because I think the main thing is I look at, in terms of being able to be flexible, I think the one thing we do need, as much as Brendan Aronson does do a solid job and has done a solid job on the right as well, I think we need a more natural number 10. Someone who can be a bit more, you pass the ball to him, he makes things happen. And that's something I think maybe we do lack a little bit of. I think a lot of our chance creation is reliant on the system working in terms of the fullbacks pushing up. Calvert-Lewin winning every aerial duel, Anton Stack getting forward. It's working. Don't get me wrong, it is working. But I think maybe when we do need that sort of plan B, that little difference maker in a sort of a tight game against Brentford away from home, which we probably should have won, I think that's where a number 10 comes into it. A Pablo type, a Samu Saiz type, someone like that would, a Premier League kind of standard would be good. Who that could be, I don't know at this moment in time. But I think in terms of position, I think number 10 feels like a very important one at this moment in time. I think another one, maybe more in terms of depth, is maybe potentially a centre-back. If we look at the situation in terms of, obviously, Bornau, when he has played, again, very limited minutes, I must admit, mainly going off that Sheffield Wednesday game, I would be worried if we're having to, in terms of, I think it is quite a big drop-off from Joe Roden or Jacob Biol or Pascal even to Sebastian Bornau. Of course, Ethan Ampadu can go into that role, but then you kind of stretch the midfield. So I think maybe we do need not necessarily a centre-back or necessarily a midfielder, but maybe another sort of like Stuart Dallas type in terms of versatile option, who can sort of allow us a bit more versatility if we do have injuries. So it has allowed us, in terms of Biol, Rodon and Strout being available at the same time to go to that three at the back. So that's another interesting one. And I'll need to go on to it. I need to go on to the goalkeeper situation. I actually think Lucas Perez's shot stopping last couple of games has been good. Yeah. I think he's actually won us points rather than lost us points. I think certainly against Liverpool. I think you have to give credit to Lucas Perez, but we've got to look at it as a whole at this moment in time. I think Lucas Perez still needs to step up. Of course, there's still a lot of games between now and January, and it might not be a popular opinion. And in terms of PSR, it might not be possible. But I look at it as a fact in terms of your goalkeeper and striker. I just said the same with Calvert-Lewin hadn't worked out. Calvert-Lewin's worked out. Perez so far hasn't. I'm not necessarily saying it can't work out, because I remember Rob Green, his season at Leeds, in terms of it started pretty badly. Obviously, that Dwight Gale mistake against Newcastle, a couple of mistakes early in that season. Then the second half of the season, something clicked with Rob Green, and he got more comfortable with the back four. And Rob Green was probably, our most solid keeper since then, in that kind of regard. And Lucas Perez, look at his actual body of work. It suggests that he's a keeper that consistently, makes more saves than he gives away in terms of he wins your points rather than cost your points, which is a basic for what you need from a goalkeeper at this level. So it's going to be interesting next couple of weeks. I think it's one to maybe watch Lucas Perez. I don't think for 1 minute we'll do this, by the way, but I would potentially look at that goalkeeper situation. Potentially James Trafford at Man City. It's maybe a little bit on the ambitious side. That one probably is a bit more, of a Newcastle type of signing, that one, but we'll see. But I do believe if Lucas Perez goes back to the form, of pretty much the last couple of weeks, where it's a goal a game, he's costing us. As much as it's a ruthless decision, as much as it's a bold decision, you can't stay up for me if you're making a mistake a game. If you're giving the goal a game away, which Perez has been doing up to the last couple of weeks, that is a concern to me. But I do appreciate that we've already got 3 goalkeepers on the books. We probably would have to get rid of at least one to make that possible. But I just think if your goalkeeper and your striker are not functioning, you've got to take action. I think those are the 2 positions on the pitch where you have to take action. If things are going wrong, you look at last season, I don't think it for 1 minute Perez and Amelie type of situation, but the boost it gave Leeds, those last sort of 6 games, we won every single game when Carl Darragh came in. We won 6 out of 7 when Carl Darragh came in. Something like that again, if Lucas Perez's form continues, might be needed. Who knows? But I appreciate that won't be a popular one. But I do think number 10 and the versatile option outfield are more important. But goalkeeper might be one. If it gets bad the next couple of weeks, it could be one which we look at.
I'd like to think it's only going to go one direction. That's to get better and better. I think he's starting to settle in. I think he's starting to look like the keeper we bought from Lyon and what Fonseca, when Fonseca described him as one of the best keepers in the world at that time.
I think he will turn it around. I think there's enough quality there. I mean, the 2 saves against Liverpool, his body of work at Lyon, his initial, obviously start at Leeds. I think there's enough there to say that Perez will turn it around. I think a lot of it, to me, feels mental with Perez in terms of maybe overthinking things a little bit, because I think it's very different going from playing for Lyon, who have been one of the better teams in France at the very least, a team that would expect to win most games they compete in, to playing for
you're facing less shots, aren't you? That type of side,
you're facing a lot more. I think that is a mental switch, that one. There's no question about it. I think the last couple of games, the goalkeeper, the actual goal kicks have not been any better. To be fair, I have to admit on that side of things. But his shot stopping has been much better the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for me, it's stopped the ball going in the net. I'll judge on Alessandro Del Piero's levels when we get to the stage where we're not conceding goals every game, and then we can worry about your output. But Darragh, it's a massive topic for conversation, because 49ers historically in January don't like to do anything. We've been get linked with everybody. Only Connor Roberts has come in January out of the 2 winter windows that they've been in charge, and that was a loan at the very last second on deadline day. This feels like they probably can't afford to sit on their hands this time round, and will need to just give Daniel Farke, if nothing else, the pieces that they didn't give him in the summer to get that squad to where he ideally wanted it for that second half of the season. Then when you look at the run-in that Leeds have towards the end of the season, that could be when it really starts to pay for itself and makes Leeds United safe. But it's a huge topic for conversation. For you, where are the priorities?
Well, the interesting thing is we have to take stock of where we are. And the fact is, we're 17th in the Premier League. we're not at pushing at the top here. So for me, there's only 2 positions in that team that are safe, that ideally couldn't be improved upon. That's Joe Rodon, who's nailed on to start every week, and Ethan Ampadu, who's nailed on to start every single week. And the Ampadu is more to do with the fact of the impact he has on the players around him. Like our record without Ampadu is awful. So he has to start every game. But we'd be lying if we didn't say that Jayden Bogle, who's a good player, really like Jayden Bogle, but we'd lie if we say we couldn't improve upon him. So the interesting part about this transfer window is that it's a World Cup year. So there's going to be very high quality players who are not getting games at their current clubs who will need a good solid 6 months. And I think Leeds would be a very attractive option for those players. A chance to come in to a team 17th in the Premier League. So you have to fancy, if you're going to go to a World Cup, you've got to back yourself. You can get into a team that's 17th in the Premier League. But then also the fact that we put it up to the big boys. You know, we gave a good game to Man City. We beat Chelsea. We nearly beat Liverpool. You know, you've got to look at that and go, that's a good team. The way we play, we're aggressive, front foot. Okay, not always a lot of possession, but maybe that's the selling point. You come here and we'll be able to keep more possession because we'll have more quality if you're in our team. So for me, it's not so much about the positions that need strengthening. It's about who's available in the market. Like if Kobe Mainoo is available, get him in. Absolutely get him in. Will he be better than Stack or Longstaff? I don't know. Maybe not.
Profile.
Exactly. Different profile, young player, hungry, pushing for an England spot. Get him in. So I think we should really be having our scouting network around Europe, looking at players who have international aspirations, that have a chance of making World Cup squads and could benefit from a 15, 20 game run in the Premier League. And do it, but please, if we're going to do it early. Do it early. You know, we're just so lackluster. If we look back on our January transfer business, it's not great. Like you got Tyler Roberts was a big one. Then you have the worst signing in the history of football, John Kevin Augustin. Yeah. So we're historically really poor, but I do think we're in a really good position here to actually get some quality in. Let's not mess it up. Do it early, identify it early, have the chats early, and get people in. Because there's a huge difference between getting someone in at the start of January and at the end of January in terms of getting them up to speed, getting games played. And I think we've an opportunity to actually nail down security in the Premier League by the end of January. I'm going to be very bold in saying that. But like with the AFCON coming up and the form we're in, I mean, we're looking at the team who've got the best away record in the Premier League coming to us on Saturday. And the 3 of us probably all agree it's a winnable game that we can get a win out of. So our tails are up. We're flying. If we beat Palace and then Sunderland with all their players who are missing for the AFCONs, and we can get 6 points against those 2 games, we're a long, long way towards promotion. And maybe then the likes of Harry Gray might get an opportunity coming into February, March, April, if we're relatively safe at that point. And there might be a chance to develop one of the most exciting prospects in British football. But I do think if it's back to the wall football at that stage, he's not going to get a chance, and nor should he, because the manager can't risk that. You see that historically, they won't risk it because defensively, those young players switch off and they cost you goals, and you end up in a bad situation. But I think there's an opportunity over the next few games, push on, get some points, but put the feelers out there for any quality that can come into this squad, because you can't tell me there's not a pool of 100 maybe players or more who could improve our team. Like, let's be honest about it.
Yeah, give me Edward Spurtjan from Krasnodar. He's on 20 GNA in 18 games now this season. He was linked to Leeds in the summer. There's an 8-10. We won't get him. I probably won't go for him, but I would love me. And Darragh, we saw him against Ireland with Armenia. He ripped us apart twice. So I'd love to see him. But yeah, that's the kind of players I think we need as a difference maker. The one question for both of you before we wrap up is going to be around the exits as well, because someone's probably going to need to go. And it's probably not, again, nothing personal against these people. And unfortunately, when you're trying to scrap for your life in the Premier League, sentimentality has to be pushed to the side. We talked about Joe Peru already, Darragh. Do you sacrifice Joe Peru for a different profile of striker? And the reason I ask that is Daniel Farke spoke about Peru as one of the best finishers in the club, and he thinks he's a top-level finisher, but did mention that maybe doesn't have the physicality and the speed that they need at certain times. later on in the press conference, when he was asked about the profile he was looking for, physicality and speed came up. So you're thinking, would you sacrifice someone? And Oscar's already touched upon it, saying there's probably teams in the championship that'll bite your hand off for him. There was interest in the Netherlands as well in him during the summer. Do you look at that and go, maybe you sacrifice Peru and you bring in a different player? People like Troy Parrott's been spoken about. I don't think Troy Parrott works in a 4-3-3 or a single striker system, but I think he could be a good foil for somebody with one of the bigger lads up front. What would you do in that situation, or what do you think you can see Daniel Farke doing?
Yeah, well, with great reluctance, I could see Peru going. I really like him, and I totally agree with Farke. I think he's the best finisher in our squad, but I just don't see how he fits into this team. And if there's an opportunity to bring in additional quality at the expense of a guy who's probably not going to play, maybe you get 5 minutes here or there, and he hasn't had an impact this season, and it doesn't work in almost any formation. I'd like to see it in the 2, but there's players ahead of him in the 2. Yeah. So at that point, you have to cut your ties, and you're got to be ruthless with this. We get one chance. Well, whether it's sale or loan, again, I've no opinion on that, because that's down to the money men. I mean, if we're getting players in on loan, maybe we can afford to loan him out, and he can be almost an insurance policy if the worst comes to the worst, and then you've got a top scorer in the championship. Or equally, its value couldn't probably be much lower than it is now, because if he goes another 5 months on the bench, he's not going to get any worse in terms of value. So maybe he goes on loan, scores a few goals, and his value goes up. And maybe that's the route forward. But yeah, I could see he's probably the only player in the squad I could see us letting go. To be honest, I'm not sure I trust many clubs with the development of Harry Gray, even though I would like to see him. I would like to see him playing games at his young age. I think I'd be very reluctant to let him go to a club in the championship and get his legs kicked off him every week. You'd really want to put some cotton wool around him. But yes, as I really do like Peru. But if he has to be the sacrificial lamb, logic suggests that he's not going to play a big part or have a big impact in the rest of our season. So if we can bring someone in who can maybe get those extra 5, 6, 7 goals, you have to look at it, don't you?
Oscar, I'm going to ask you the same question, but before I get to that, I'm laughing. Crystal Palace have just put their lineup out for tonight's game, and they have rested pretty much the entire team. So they've gone against UEFA's rule of must play the strongest 11 available. They've got Benitez in goal, a back three of Lerma, King, and Canvey. They've got Souza, Devaney, Rodney, and Benamar in midfield. Essa, Uche, and Drake's Thomas up front. And best of luck if you know who any of those players are. Their squad numbers start at 40 and go up to 60. So that's what they have decided to obviously take a fine from FIFA or from UEFA and put their strongest 11 out against Leeds United, which might change all of our predictions now for the game on Saturday, Oscar. But yeah, thoughts on the Joel Peru situation, Oscar, and what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think with Peru, I totally agree with Darragh. I think if you get offered, decent money, I'd say, something like 10 million, let's say, for a player who isn't in the manager's plans for at least 6 months at the earliest, kind of thing, I think you have got to take the money there and then. Of course, there is the option of the loan obligation or just a loan and see what happens. I think whatever happens, but I'd feel that probably with financial fair play, it's probably just going to be best to, maybe cut ties permanently on Joel Peru. And I do think, potentially, you mentioned Troy Parrott there. There is other options who I think Daniel Farke would be more Farke-like type of strikers in that kind of sense, because we have to remember last season, in terms of Peru claimed the spot over the season, but it wasn't plain sailing between him and Matteo Joseph. Joseph did have, quite a lot of games on Peru at times.
He started the season as the 9.
Joseph started the first 8 or 9 games, and then Peru sort of, found his way in and kept his place, to be fair to him. And it'll be interesting from that point of view. And of course, the back end of 2023, 2024, Bamford took the spot for the half a season off Peru, effectively. So, it is interesting, in terms of it does feel like not something totally new off Farke, despite Peru's goal per minute ratio for this club is absolutely fantastic. But I think if it does free up an option to go for it in January, I think we kind of have got to take it at this moment in time. Reluctantly, but I think longer term thinking, I think we have probably got to go for that. But I'm thinking as well, when we're talking about January, our last good January signing, and I think I think it's Sol Bamba. I think it's the great Sol Bamba, the great man. I think it's the last good January signing I can think of off the top of my head. I throw in Max Gradle.
Was Rafinha a January sign or was he a summer? Was he a last minute summer sign?
Rafinha was back end of the summer.
Close to deadline day, wasn't he?
Deadline day, yeah.
Summer, yeah.
Well, then you've got Max Gradle, January 2010, Richard Naylor, year before. We're going back a long way here, kind of thing. It's, but I genuinely think it's probably Sol Bamba the last, in terms of having an impact on the whole team, which he did that season. We were probably going down before Sol Bamba arrived. So we need a personality as well. I think that's a great sign as well. In terms of a personality at this point as well. When I say personality, I don't mean arrogance. I mean someone who's going to galvanise the dressing room. Because we know Rose and Ampadu do a really good job of that. But maybe without Rose and Ampadu, maybe we need one or two more leaders as well. And maybe a bit more nastiness as well to us. In terms of,
I'd love that.
I think that's maybe something maybe a little bit lacking. I was looking at Anton Stach and thinking there's a lot of similarities to Matthijs Klik. But I do want a little bit more of the of the slyness that Matthijs Klik had, up his sleeve from time to time. Maybe a little bit more of that from Leeds from time to time. Because you look at the teams around us in terms of Forest, we've got a lot of players who can get under your skin quite easily. West Ham do, Burnley do. Maybe that's something maybe we do lack. It's not going to be the massive difference, but it's just these little small margins where you look at and think maybe we could do with a little bit of a different personality, in the team from time to time as well. So it'll be interesting. But our January record is not great. We can't get away from that. It's not great. But we have to say, under the 49ers as a whole, it's more because we haven't really bothered with January. In terms of we've kind of been happy with what we've done before that. And to be fair, last season I think we all wanted maybe one or two in January, but ultimately we kind of had more than enough. We won the promotion at the counter. Okay. The actual title was much more complicated, but I don't think a signing in the end would have made that much difference in terms of the way the team was set up the back end of last season. But you look at this season, to be fair, there was been doubts about the recruitment, but I think other than Paris, and of course you can maybe talk about Justin and Bornau, but in terms of the actual first teamers, I think the success rate has been unbelievable, to be honest, under the 49ers. You have to give credit where it's due. It has been really, really good.
Yeah, it's definitely turned in the last 4 or 5 games where they're playing more.
The
new fans are getting off more games.
I'm totally knee-jerk here. I mean, my opinion on
we all are.
So many players is
we're Leeds fans
a lot.
It's what have you done for me lately kind of thing. Absolutely. So I wouldn't worry about that. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Look, massive thanks to both of you for joining me tonight. You can check Darragh out on X at DarraghC81. Oscar Mario is over on X at Oscar Mario. You can also check both the lads out. Darragh on this side is at Leeds That, and Oscar is on All Leeds TV. You can check them out on their audios and their visuals as well. Before we go, Darragh, anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
Maybe give you one funny one. So I just mentioned Matthijs Klik there. And did you see his tweet or his X last week? So he was playing a friendly and he gave the most horrendous dive, like worse than Gordon Watson for Sheffield Wednesday against Leeds. It was horrendous. And a guy came on and said, "You should be ashamed of yourself diving in a friendly." And his reply back was, "When the moment comes, I do what needs to be done." I just thought, what a great bloke. I just tweeted him and said, "Never change. Never change."
No, don't. We need that. Bit of shithousery. I love it. Oscar, how about you? Anything you want to wrap us up with?
Hope you all have a great Christmas, and hopefully we put on a performance before Christmas, because it will be we'll dull it a little bit if we have another dodgy game against Palace. But I think at the very least, the very, very minimum, we will be competitive. I'm pretty confident of that. The result might not necessarily go our way, but I do think for 90 minutes, we won't make an embarrassment of ourselves. I don't feel that's going to happen with this Leeds team. I feel the winter period is going to be tough for us. Look at some of the games, especially the fact some of them are away from home. Obviously, Liverpool at home compared to Liverpool away is a totally different different challenge. Newcastle at home compared to Newcastle away, totally different challenge. So we are going to have difficult moments, but I think at the very minimum, we are going to compete. I don't think we're going to take too much of a battering on the goal difference. I do hope, but I think we've got potential to pick up some points over the next couple of weeks. Whether it's against Palace, whether it's against Sunderland, I do feel we're going to pick up some points, which is bizarre to say compared to where I was at probably this time 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a drunk Leeds United leaning against the Christmas bar somewhere, listening to all that positivity, going, somebody hold my beer, I'll be back in a second, and go and ruin his Christmas. So yeah, fingers crossed it doesn't happen in Leeds. Don't do Leeds stuff. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there, folks. Massive thanks as always for supporting the channel. If you're listening on audio, if you could just give us a channel rating, that would be fantastic. And if you're on YouTube, just hit the like button on your way out the door, and we'll be back on Friday morning tomorrow for more Leeds news before we get ready for the game at the weekend, with the review on YouTube and the watch along over on bigup.com. You can check that out over the weekend. Enjoy the rest of your evening or morning or whenever you're watching this. I'll talk to you soon. See you later. Bye.